On Tech News Today, Europe hammers Google with 2 big antitrust complaints. Plus, Apple bought a killer camera startup for future iPhones, and we'll tell you about a new video camera that charges itself. It's all coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Wednesday, April 15th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Harry's. For guys who want a great shave experience for a fraction of what you're paying now, go to harrys.com. Get $5 off your first purchase by entering the code TNT when you check out. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to the show. My name is Mike Elgan. Our normal Wednesday co-anchor, Katie Benner, is off today, so let's jump right into the news. Google today was charged by Europe's top antitrust authority with an official complaint. The company is accused of favoring Google Shopping over competitors. Google faces a maximum penalty of, wait for it, $6 billion. In a separate investigation, the EU will also look into alleged anti-competitive deals made for Google's Android operating system. Todd Frankel writes for The Washington Post and joins us now to sort all this out for us. Welcome to you, Todd.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. Now, what was Google's response to these charges?
The same response they've sort of maintained all along is that this was baseless and that Europe had overstepped its bounds and that there was really no problem that needed fixing.
Astonishingly, the shopping investigation took 5 years to get to this point. How long before there's likely to be a conclusion to all of this?
Well, things should move a little bit quicker now that the statement of objections has been filed. The way the groundwork's been laid out is Google has 10 weeks to respond formally and then can request a public airing of the charges. And then after that, we could see it go to some sort of what they call trial court, but more likely we'll see intense settlement negotiations. And, most people's observers seem to think this might wrap up within a year, assuming it doesn't get bogged down as the case against Microsoft did at this stage.
Now, presumably, in addition to emptying Google's pockets if they're victorious, the European Union will force some sort of changes on Google. What would those changes be? And more specifically, since we're talking about search results, how would they monitor and enforce them?
Yeah, that's one of the sticking points in the case. And interestingly, the competitive czar for the EU today, actually, it was earlier today, she had a press conference sort of laying out the case.
Margaret Vestager, I think her name is?
Vestager, yes. So she was sort of explaining that she was less interested in sort of tweaking the algorithm or requiring that Google change the way it displayed search results, and that she was more interested in coming up with some sort of understanding, some sort of principle for guiding how Google proceeded with this. Which I think is smart, rather than saying, oh, this is, we don't know anything about algorithms, we don't know anything about page design, but let's come to a general agreement of principles that could be laid out that we could agree this is how search should be done. So, it's still very much up in the air. The changes that they want are sort of hard to figure out exactly how that would look like for the consumer.
Yeah, especially since this is really a moving target. First of all, you have personalization. So every individual consumer is going to get different results based on their history, based on what Google knows about them. Second of all, Google is always tweaking its algorithm, so the results are always kind of different. And third of all, there's this sort of circular argument we've seen in all of these complaints against Google search, which is that, the accusation is, well, you always put your competitors on the second or third page, and Google will say, well, they're less significant than the ones that we put on the first page. And then the argument back is, well, they're less significant because you put them on the second page, and therefore you're harming the competition, and et cetera, et cetera. How do you, it's a game of whack-a-mole. How do you get something solid enough for a ruling in an official governmental body like this over something as nebulous and shifting as search engine results?
Right. I think you've hit it on the head there. That is the trick that has sort of eluded everyone to figure out how to proceed. And what is the problem? How do you solve this problem that is constantly evolving? If it's a problem at all. Google asserts that it is not a problem. That they released some data today, sort of showing with the Google Travel how how lowly it does rank. And Bookings.com does much better. And as Bookings.com would probably, someone was pointing out, depends on Google to even be found. So again, it goes back to this thing where we don't know about algorithms, we don't know about page designs. We're not going to ask you to fix that, but we want some sort of general principle where everyone has a fair shot. And for whatever reason, the competitors to Google and this competition commission at the EU feels that they do not have a fair level playing field, and that Google, I think one of the more interesting things about this is that Google has such a large control over the search market in Europe. 90% market share, where in the U.S. we're talking about 67, maybe 70% market share.
And it seems to me that the European authorities are somewhat at odds with the public in Europe, because the European public seems almost obsessed with Google and certainly favors it or chooses it over alternatives, and that could also presumably affect Google shopping. If they have the warm and fuzzies about Google in general, then they may choose Google's shopping features over a competitor they may not have heard of. Again, it's more nebulousness, and I can't wait to find out what the EU concludes in all this. Now, what's the complaint against Android? What is the complaint specifically, and also, what is the status of this investigation at this point?
It is very, very, very early, and the details that they've sort of revealed so far have been scant. Essentially, Android is they realize that mobile is growing, and everyone's seeing that. That's such an important part of the market, and they suspect that there's something there. And they said these are what they call preliminary findings, and they haven't really revealed what their preliminary findings are. But again, the same issue of competitiveness and whether Google is showing a preference for its own operating system and its own features in the mobile space.
The European authorities seem to take issue with everything Google does. They don't like they don't like the Google Street View cars. They don't like the privacy policy. They don't like their search engine results. They don't like Android. They don't like anything. They saddled the company primarily as the main company who's affected by the right to be forgotten craziness, especially the demand by the European authorities that Google censor globally, not just in Europe, for right to be forgotten type of queries. Does Europe have a special beef or obsession with Google, or is it just a coincidence that Google's way of doing business happens to run against European law? What's your take on that?
I think it's actually just the dominance that market is. I'm not sure that it's Google in particular. I'm not sure that if Microsoft, if it were to reach 9% market saturation and to really so much crowd out every other competitor, that they wouldn't be taking a look at some other main player in this as well. So I'm not sure, Google is in lots of these, as you point out, sensitive areas that have attracted a lot of attention, but they have such market dominance that it's impossible to ignore them. There's almost no one else in some of these markets, which is just astounding. So, the regulators there say they want to foster innovation and give these other companies a chance, which is very different from the U.S. sort of market where we might protect consumers, but we don't worry too much about other companies necessarily competing against other companies, no monopolies. But over there, they are much more concerned with making sure that companies, smaller companies, have a shot in favor, as they say, to foster innovation.
Virgil in the chat room asks, well, why don't they go after Facebook? Facebook is a huge company too, and the answer is they are going after Facebook and Amazon and Apple and a bunch of other U.S. companies. There's a lot of activity in the regulation of Silicon Valley type companies, also Amazon, which is in Seattle. Anyway, a very interesting development. Of course, this was heavily expected. We've been expecting this for 5 years now. So here it is at long last. Todd C. Frankel is at WashingtonPost.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at TC Frankel. Thanks for joining us today, Todd.
Great. Thank you so much.
Let us know what you think about Europe's attack on Google, or their, I guess I shouldn't characterize it like that. What do you think about Europe's action against Google in terms of antitrust, both on the Android front and also on the search engine front? Send us an email to tnt@twit.tv and let us know. We got more news for you in just a sec, but first, let's talk about Harry's. Harry's is the fantastic way to shave, because this is a company that's going to give you high quality and a very, very low price. Ordinary razor blades cost about $4 each, and Harry's is about half that even though the quality is generally higher. They make their own razors in their own factory in Germany, and they've engineered these razors for sharpness and high performance. It's great stuff. Plus, they have fantastic moisturizing shaving creams and aftershaves that are really, really great, made with natural ingredients, and they smell great, and it's just a really, really good experience overall when you are using Harry's. Now, in each kit, you get a razor with a handle. It looks and feels great, 3 razor blades, and foaming shave gel, and they start at the Truman set at just $15. That's right, and all that stuff I mentioned is only $15, and it's even less than that if you know the secret code. Just go to harrys.com and get $5 off that $15 of your first, or whatever your first purchase is, by using the code TNT for Tech News Today. That's harrys.com. I'm going to spell that for you. It's HARRYS.com. Just enter TNT at checkout. And we thank Harry's for their support of Tech News Today. Well, Apple confirmed yesterday that it bought an Israeli startup called Lynx Computational Imaging for about $20 million. The company makes tiny cameras for smartphones and tablets. Or Hirschauge is a tech reporter for the Wall Street Journal and joins us now from Tel Aviv. Welcome to you, Or.
Hi, Mike.
Now, the Lynx company has some very interesting camera technology. The company has claimed in the past that it can offer the same quality as an SLR, but in a tiny package. Can you talk about what's different about their cameras?
Lynx are playing in a field called computational optics, and there's a bunch of companies doing that. I think the most well-known is probably Lyto, and these are companies that are taking information coming from 2 sensors, whether it's in 1 camera or 2 cameras, all capturing the image at the same time, and then using algorithms in order to combine the information and create a better image, to be able to change focus automatically, to remove backgrounds, to gauge depth and 3D, and so on. What's interesting about Lynx is that they're not doing that using 2 camera or 2 cameras aperture, like being used in Huawei's latest models, but they're doing it using 4 sensors, 3 of them color sensors, and 1 of them a monochromatic sensor that are supposed to go behind a single camera, and that gives it an extra low profile, extra low height factor and width factor. And apparently, they have some good results. I have some insider information coming from a few sources about the sort of cooperation they've had before being acquired by Apple. So apparently, Motorola was trying to implement their camera module, but that did not go through. And they also had some sort of negotiations with LG, Samsung, and Microsoft.
So this sounds to me...
That's according to 1 or 2 sources, depending on the different companies I mentioned.
This kind of reminds me of Apple's acquisition of the fingerprint sensor technology, whose name escapes me for the moment. The chat room will remind me. But on the one hand, they got the technology, but on the other, they took it away from everybody else and left the rest of the industry scrambling. And it looks like this acquisition could do the same thing for computational imaging in smartphones to a certain extent. Now, computational imaging enables certain types of special features. Can you talk about how that works and what sort of features this enables?
So I think most of the viewers probably know what Lyto does, that it enables you to refocus the image after actually taking the image. There are a bunch of other things that can be achieved, but I think the features that Lynx were promoting and focusing on were better quality for images taken in low light conditions and lower shutter rate needed in indoor situations where the lighting is not so bright as in the outside.
Now, the company that I had referenced but couldn't remember the name of, that Apple bought, that was involved in the fingerprint sensor was Authentech. That's the company that they acquired, just to follow up on that briefly. Now, the Israeli startup scene is extremely hot right now. We're seeing all kinds of acquisitions and activity within Israel, and Apple has been taking advantage. Can you talk about Apple's deepening involvement in the Israeli tech sector?
So Tim Cook visited Israel only 2 months ago, less than 2 months ago. That was his first visit and the first visit of an Apple CEO in the country. And Cook mentioned that if they've hired their first Israeli employee in 2011, now they already have 700 employees here. And that's based on organic growth, but also on 3 acquisitions, one of them of flash memory company called Anobit, another of PrimeSense. That's a company that was designing the chips behind the 3D motion sensing abilities of Microsoft's Kinect in its earlier versions. And then they bought off, or actually rehired, persons that were laid off by Texas Instruments in one of its cellular units in Israel.
Very interesting. Or Hirschauge is at WSJ.com, of course. And you can follow him on Twitter at that's ORR _ Hirsch, that's HIRSCH. Thank you so much for joining us today, Or.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Well, we told you yesterday that Nokia might acquire Alcatel-Lucent. Now the deal is done, and the merger is going to happen, pending regulatory approval, of course. Here to talk about what the world will look like post-merger is Matt Hamblen, senior editor for Computer World. Welcome to you, Matt.
Hey, Mike. How's everybody?
Everybody's good on this end. Now, this will completely transform what Nokia does, for starters, as a business, won't it?
Yeah, they're going to be doing more with research, obviously, with Alcatel-Lucent. They have Bell Labs in France, and there's no question that the two together are going to work on a scheme to improve 5G connectivity. There's no question that there's going to be more of an ability to connect wired and wireless networks than there is today.
What's really interesting to me about this is the patent situation. Can you talk about what their patent portfolio will look like after the merger?
Well, they both have a lot of patents, hundreds of patents, and they're going to be merging the patents that Nokia has, which would be more for the cellular connectivity of a smartphone to a tower. And to the base of the tower, there's a thing called a base station, usually right below the tower. And that's their piece of it. And they have a lot of patent work around the software and the hardware that works in that part of it. And then on the other end, Alcatel-Lucent's working from the base station back to the edge computers and then out to the backbone and other places too. But there's a lot of fiber in that part. So you can see how those two parts would make the better unified whole. I think there's definitely some crossover, but they're really seen by the big patent analysts as complementary. Doesn't mean that they're going to have some new innovative project right away, but they do already work with, through Alcatel, they work with AT&T and Verizon in the U.S. And this will give Nokia a bigger place to enter into those big companies.
Now, I'm hearing that their competitors for the combined company will be Ericsson, Huawei, Cisco, and even Samsung. How will the new combined company compare with these competitors?
Well, their combined revenues, I believe, were 27 billion if you take last year's revenues. That's U.S. and somewhat lower for euros, but that makes them slightly bigger than Huawei or than Ericsson, and so that's a real reason for this merger to happen. This is a very good economic move by the two companies, and both boards have approved the deal.
It's surprising that they would be bigger than Huawei. That is an impressive situation. And there was some concern that the French government might scuttle this whole thing because they don't like foreign companies buying French technology companies. But in fact, I guess European is French enough for the French authorities in this case.
Right. I think that's true. And I think, Alcatel-Lucent employees love the fact that the French government stood up for them. I think that's, there's no question this is a good deal for this. Well, this is a benefit primarily to the stockholders of each company and to the survival of the companies. It's really questionable what it means for the workers or for the customers. I mean, that's always the way with mergers. It's all about self-preservation. And, I think Yeah, they have a very strong interest in promoting their own companies, and but there's a reality. This is a global market. Huawei is a great reason for that. That's one reason this happened, was to compete against Huawei.
Matt Hamblen is at computerworld.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at Matt Hamblen. Thanks for joining us today, Matt.
Thank you.
All right. Columbia University researchers have created a self-powering video camera. It captures light for the video and then converts that light into electricity to power itself. Amazing. Prachi Patel is a science and technology writer who wrote about this project for IEEE Spectrum and joins us now. Welcome, Prachi.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. Now, how does this camera work? It sounds pretty advanced.
Well, yeah, so the researchers' idea was, their whole goal was to design an imaging system that would be very simple. And the idea that they came up with is, one way they say that you can make a camera that is powering itself is to just attach a solar cell to a camera. But of course, that would be a big, bulky imaging system. They wanted to make a really small system that could be used in, little sensors. We hear about the Internet of Things, sensors being embedded in objects around us. So that's kind of where they were going, is to make really small cameras that could basically be put in place and then you would just forget about it. And what better way to do it than have a camera that can run on its own without needing a battery. So the way they do it is, they rely on the basic fact that both the image sensors in a camera and solar cells both use the same basic electronic device, and that's called a photodiode. And this little device essentially converts light into electricity. Whenever light falls on it, it generates a voltage and electric current. It's just used in different ways in an image sensor versus a solar cell. In an image sensor, it's arranged in a circuit where it does something slightly different. There's a different voltage across it. It works in a different mode versus when it's in a solar cell. In an image sensor, it is measuring the intensity of light that falls on it. And in a solar cell, it is converting the light into a voltage and electric power. And so the researchers came up with a new kind of design for this circuit for the photodiode so that it can stay in just one mode, but it can do both of those actions, which is it can measure light, but it can also convert that light into electric power.
Unbelievable. Now, what are the potential future uses for this kind of technology, according to the researchers?
So the main thing they're going for, like I said, is tiny, small, low-cost, kind of standalone cameras that could be embedded into wearable gadgets, wearable devices, or it could be embedded into just objects all around us to make these ubiquitous sensor networks. They also say, it's very rudimentary right now. It has a very small resolution and not really a high frame rate. But they say that potentially by improving it, they could also use it in smartphones or smartwatches. And then, when it's not recording video or images, it could be harvesting light and generating energy for those gadgets.
I imagine this would be great for space applications as well. Now, the posted image is black and white and kind of low resolution, as you mentioned. Is there any reason why it has to be black and white? Do they believe that color is possible in the future?
I'm not sure exactly why it's what decides that black and white versus color factor, but it's such an early stage. It's just a prototype right now. I bet that's something they're probably thinking about.
I'm sure it is, especially since they mentioned that it could go in smartphones. Of course, you'd have to have a color camera in smartphones and so on. Prachi Patel is at lekh.org. She's an independent writer. Thank you so much for joining us today, Prachi.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, let us know what you think about the solar-powered camera technology by sending email to tnt@twit.tv. Google is talking to advertisers about a new approach to online ads. It would enable advertisers to target ads at their existing customers, according to the Wall Street Journal. And Google would identify those customers by their email addresses, which would be provided to Google by the advertiser. The offering would be similar to Facebook's Custom Audiences program, and the new ads would hit the internet late in the year or even next year, according to Journal sources. Well, in product updates, Microsoft updated its newish Office 365 app, Delve yesterday. The new Delve gets a profile page with information about your interests, plus your reports and bosses. The company also rolled out iOS and Android apps and says they're working on a Windows Phone version. Mary Jo Foley told me this morning that she, Paul Thurrott, and Leo will be talking about Delve on Windows Weekly today, which is on at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, right after this show. So stick around after this show if you want to learn more about Microsoft Delve and, of course, all the Microsoft news. In mergers and acquisitions news, TechCrunch is reporting that Yahoo is in talks to buy Foursquare. Now, we've heard lots of rumors about everybody wanting to buy Foursquare. This one seems pretty legit, and it's kind of a shame because Yahoo tends to be the graveyard of companies. Whenever they acquire something, you stop hearing about it for 2 years, and then they announce that they're killing it, and you're like, oh, yeah, I remember that. That was great. Anyway, that's just a rumor at this point. We'll see if it really happens. Well, we got a big number for you today, 200. That's approximately how many employees Samsung Display has reportedly devoted to making screens just for Apple. Well, our TNT fan of the day is S.W. Adams in Davidson, Michigan, who posted this picture on Twitter. And there it is, our multiple screen fan base. We're looking at all kinds of stuff there. But there it is. Love to see it. How do you watch or listen to TNT? Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup and post it on Google+, Twitter, or Facebook. And use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT so we can find it. You can subscribe to Tech News Today on Player FM and choose your favorite way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT. If you'd like to help us grow our audience, here's how you can do it. Just post a link to TNT on the social media site of your choice and tag 3 friends that you think would enjoy the show, along with your recommendation to subscribe. You can also watch us live every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC at live.twit.tv, or on the app or browser plugin of your choice, which you can find at twit.tv/apps. You can follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV, and you can follow me personally on Flickr. Just go to Flickr and search for Mike Elgan. Let us know what you think. Send us an email to tnt@twit.tv or call 260-TNT-SHOW and leave a message. Also, don't miss Tech News Tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific every single weeknight. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Tech News Today. This show is produced by Jason Cleanthes and edited by Anthony Nielsen. My name is Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.